morning, almost afternoon. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to all of you for what I think is an exciting hour ahead of us. Today we're talking mini-grids, something that really is important. You know what's exciting about working in the development field is that you don't rest until you find solutions for the poor. And we know that in many countries where we work, we talk about the national grids, right? And we know that these are eventually where we ought to be going. But for many countries, it's going to be a while before they can get everybody on the national grid. In the meantime, what happens to the people who are not in those zones that are connected to the national grid? Do they wait the 10, 20, 15 years that will be needed to get them on those national grids? Or can we do something about transforming, giving them a chance to transform their lives with other technology that gets them the access that they need while they wait to get on the main grids? So mini grids has come up as one of those solutions. But what's exciting about mini grids is also the potential, the possibility to make them renewable. So it is part of the renewable energy solution. It is part of making sure no one is left behind and bridging that energy poverty gap that means everything to people's lives and livelihoods. In this day of huge risks, but also disasters, we need to have everyone connected. And we're very, as UNDP, we're very proud to be co-hosting this event today with RMI and others. We will also take the time to launch the Minigrids program, which we hope is going to be a major part of the solution. But let's talk mini-grids. And we're going to start with two video messages. One is from the CEO of the Global Environment Facility. Many of you know that the GEF really contributes largely in terms of financial contributions to these kinds of programs, and will be funding the mini-grids program overall. So we're very happy to hear from Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO of the Global Environment Facility. After listening to him on video, we will hear from the UNDP administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner. So let's start with Jeff.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, my name is Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, and I'm the CEO and chairperson of the Global Environment Facility, the GEF. Thank you for the opportunity to open this important event, and I'm sorry I couldn't attend in person. Energy access has been a key pillar of the GEF work since its inception. Incidentally, one of the first GEF projects, for example, was a UNDP solar photovoltaic rural electrification project in Uganda approved in 1995. It is disheartening and very disappointing, to say the least, that almost 30 years later, the electrification gap, not just in Uganda but around the world, remains huge. The latest World Bank data shows that globally in 2022, there are still more than 730 million people without access to electricity and 2.4 billion without access to clean cooking solutions. As at today's rate, we will miss the SDG 7 goal of universal access by 2030, and by a lot. We need to do better and much faster. As the title of today's event well illustrates, far from being an issue or only related to reducing carbon emissions, providing energy access to the modern, decentralized, renewable energy system is above all about equity and improving livelihoods, increasing resilience and protecting nature. First, it's about equity, since access to reliable and affordable electricity is a precondition to human development. It is an instrument to improve livelihoods and promote income-generating opportunities, lifting people out of poverty and fostering emancipation of women and children. Second, it is about the sea. As climate change is affecting the viability of traditional energy systems across vast geographies, like in Nile, for instance, where the rain is no longer filling up lakes and reservoirs, and 50% of the power produced 15 years ago by hydropower dropped to only 20% today, largely replaced by thermal power plants. Or like in Cuba, where just a few weeks ago, a hurricane, Ian, knocked off the main power plant, leaving the island in the dark just when it needed power the most. And third, energy access to modern, decentralized system is about nature. There is a strong correlationship between improved energy access and decrease in the rates of deforestation and ecosystem degradation. This is why, for instance, several countries of the Sahel are now considering including energy access as a key component of the JET-supported Great Green Wall initiative to combat desertification. These are the reasons why the JET has been pushing this agenda for decades and invested substantially resources in the second replenishment cycle of the JET through the African Minigrids program, AMP, that has been launched today. The AMP is one of our flagship programs now covering 21 countries across the African continent. We are very excited to be marking this milestone and to move from design to implementation. In terms of looking ahead, we remain committed to support efforts to achieve universal energy access by 2030. In the coming years, we will continue to work with all of you to accelerate progress towards achieving SDG 7. Universal access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy is key for reaching our climate mitigation, adaptation, and nature conservation objectives. Thank you so much.
Can we give a round of applause to the Jeff CEO, please? Those were really powerful words from a major financier. Now we hear from the administrator.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I hope to join you in person today, but my schedule did not allow me to do so. The year 2022 has been defined by record-breaking heat waves, floods, and droughts, which have wreaked havoc in many corners of the globe. This climate emergency, driven by fossil fuels, is plain to see in regions like the Horn of Africa, where climate change-induced drought is tipping millions of people into hunger and, yes, sadly, once again into famine. As a global community, we are still far from our target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yet, this does not tell the full story. Averages outlined in reports often obscure the sometimes tectonic shifts that are happening and taking place in the countries, communities, or regions. From solar power and electric vehicles to grid-scale batteries and heat pumps, the world is pressing into a mass adoption mode of full green technologies. Many developing countries are leading the way, from Angola to Egypt to Morocco, and the new Africa Minigrids program launching today is another clear demonstration that deploying large-scale renewable energies is not only possible, it is now part of our common energy future. A partnership between the Global Environment Facility, the United Nations Development Programme, the African Development Bank, and the Rocky Mountain Institute, this program will support mini-grid markets in 21 countries on the continent of Africa. We estimate that solar mini-grids can bring electricity to 265 million people in these countries by the year 2030. 265 million people. Just last month, the program commenced its first national projects in Nigeria and Eswatini. Such efforts will power homes, hospitals, and schools many for the first time. It will also set the conditions to create new jobs and livelihoods, helping to reduce poverty and address inequalities. Notably, the Africa Minigrids program is a clear demonstration of developing countries asserting their sovereignty, taking more control over their development destiny, and addressing the need for access to electricity with a clean energy future pathway. It is a realization that it now makes complete economic sense to invest in the energy infrastructure of tomorrow by addressing the urgent development needs of today. In UNDP, we are supporting countries to develop new policies and harness the technologies, expertise, and finance they need to fully leverage the power of renewable energies to drive forward their national development strategies. Those solutions, including supporting countries to attract $65 billion in new investments, primarily from the private sector, that will be needed to realize the mini-grid opportunity under this program. It also comes with a keen realization that we are not only allowing people to access new sources of electricity, in fact, enabling them to do so, but also the opportunities that this brings. This is a vital co-investment in our ability as a global community to limit the steady march of climate change. In this respect, the Africa Minigrids program is founded upon a recognition that we want to complement existing clean energy initiatives, learn from them, and seek new partners to ensure that our efforts together have a multiplier effect. Indeed, all of UNDP's energy program is designed to be scaled up as we work with our partners to enable up to 500 million additional people to gain access to affordable and clean energy by the year 2025. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Minigrids program is a signal of profound change that is now taking place. It shows what is possible when the world approaches decarbonization as a driver of development in line with the global goals. It is not just about building a better world tomorrow. As our window to limit the worst effects of climate change is closing rapidly, it is about working with communities to build a better world today and the pathways towards successful, sustainable development for tomorrow. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Let me now begin the program. My name is Ahuna Ezie-Kongwa, and I'm the UNDP Regional Director for Africa. Very happy to be here today to welcome all of you warmly. And we're going to kick it off with an impressive gentleman from the DRC, Mr. Chinamula, who is the Director General of the National Electrification Agency and also Energy Services, right? Please welcome on stage and join us. Mr. Chinamula, am I pronouncing that right? Chinamula. You are the DG of this very important agency in the DRC. And for over 20 years, you have been a champion in development in your country. And today, one of your key areas of focus is really making sure that electricity gets to everyone who needs it, not only in terms of light bulbs in households, but actually in a transformative way, powering industry and also livelihood. So we want to hear your story. In a few minutes, you give us the short version of what I'm sure is a long and rich story that you have experienced in the last 20 years. Welcome. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Chinamula.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aruna. Thank you for inviting me, but I would like to speak in French. In order to, you can use your translation sets to use it. Thank you very much. I will be very short parce que j'ai entendu beaucoup de choses déjà dites dans les introductions. Et je voudrais commencer par saluer et remercier l'organisation, donc le PNID, remercier également le GEF et REMA également, et bien sûr l'Afrique, la Banque de développement africaine pour l'invitation. Ce programme, il est très important pour nous, Africains, à plus d'un titre. On vient de les mentionner. Nous avons des réseaux très limités au niveau du pays. Nos réseaux sont limités et n'arrivent pas à desservir une grande partie de la population. Donc, du coup, ce sont les mini-réseaux qui peuvent nous apporter des solutions. Ça, c'est l'expérience qu'il a démontré. Alors, pour les mini-réseaux, j'ai deux messages particuliers que je voudrais faire passer en ces moments. Le premier message, c'est que la course vers l'électrification, pour nous, doit être considérée comme une course stratégique. Ça veut dire que ça doit être un marathon et non une course des 100 mètres plats. Vous savez, les 100 mètres plats, c'est une course où on doit être spontané. On ne fait pas des investissements spontanés qui arrivent, comme on appelle en anglais, one shot, qui arrivent et qui disparaissent, comme on vient de nous montrer la situation de l'Ouganda que nous avons vu tout à l'heure. Il y a eu des investissements 20 ans après, il y a plus, le gap est toujours important. Nous voulons que ça soit un marathon de long terme. Ça veut dire que ça soit plus stratégique. Et pour que ça soit plus stratégique, il faut considérer les leçons tirées des expériences récentes. J'ai été impressionné dans un entretien que je viens d'avoir avec un pays africain où on a implanté des mini-grids, des mini-réseaux. 5 ans après, les échos que j'ai reçus, c'est que 5 ans après, 80% de ces mini-réseaux ne fonctionnent plus, ont disparu. 80%. Et ça a été financé par un partenaire, je ne cite pas les noms, mais 80% ne fonctionnent plus 5 ans après. Nous, on ne veut pas ce genre de projet, on ne veut pas ce genre de programme. Il faut effectivement qu'on réfléchisse. J'apprécie beaucoup ce que l'administrateur du PNI vient de dire, que ce programme va nous aider à monter des politiques, des stratégies, des modèles économiques pour pouvoir soutenir le développement des mini-réseaux pour une longue période. C'est ça que nous voulons. Nous ne voulons pas des investissements qui viennent décorer et qui disparaissent au bout de 2 ans, au bout de 3 ans, au bout de 5 ans. Et pour y arriver, l'expérience que j'ai, comme on m'a posé la question, c'est qu'il faut orienter l'énergie à la fois au ménage pour l'éclairage, mais il faut surtout orienter l'énergie vers l'usage productif. C'est l'usage productif qui va aider les ménages vivant dans les zones rurales et périurbaines à pouvoir tirer des dividendes de l'électrification en ayant des revenus, en ayant des emplois, à pouvoir transformer leurs produits agricoles. Mais un tel programme nécessite qu'au-delà de l'électricité, que les partenaires se mettent ensemble. C'est ça aussi le problème. Ça nécessite qu'il y ait des appuis technologiques dans les zones rurales et périurbaines pour pouvoir utiliser l'électricité à des fins productives. Donc il faut les machines, il faut les moulins, il faut les décortiqueuses, il faut un certain nombre de choses d'appui technologique, ce qui nécessite un partenariat plus large, comme c'est le cas aujourd'hui. Donc je voudrais encore saluer les partenariats entre le PNID, le GEF, la Banque africaine de développement et bien sûr RMI Africa. C'est vraiment ce genre de partenariat que nous voulons. Le deuxième message et le dernier que je voudrais livrer par l'expérience dans 20 ans dans le secteur de l'énergie, c'est que aujourd'hui, il est possible de combler les retards. Nous avons un retard accumulé depuis plusieurs années. Nous sommes en 2022. 2030, c'est dans moins de 8 ans. C'est 7 ans quasiment, nous sommes en 2030. Il est possible de faire du miracle dans les 7 ans qui nous restent. C'est possible. Mais pour y arriver, il y a une condition importante, c'est l'audace. Il faut qu'on soit audacieux. Audace, ça veut dire quoi pour moi? Audace, ça veut dire qu'il faut changer d'approche. Il faut impérativement qu'on change d'approche de travail. Et c'est là, du côté des gouvernements, nous sommes conscients. Nous avons pris nos responsabilités. Je viens d'assister au début de ce mois à une réunion en Tunisie, à Tunis, où les agences d'électrification rurale de toute l'Afrique se sont réunies. Nous étions à peu près 25 pays avec des agences d'électrification rurale et périurbaine. Nous avons compris que la responsabilité première de l'électrification, c'est le gouvernement. Et nous en sommes conscients et nous portons cette responsabilité. Et au niveau du gouvernement, on a fait des réformes. Aujourd'hui, on a libéralisé le secteur de l'énergie. C'est libéralisé avec une autorité de régulation. On a créé des agences d'électrification rurale et périurbaine. Nous devons soutenir les investissements privés. Pour soutenir cela, il faut mettre en place un cadre d'investissement. C'est ce que nous faisons actuellement. Et nous sommes en train de prendre nos responsabilités. Deuxième chose, en tant que gouvernement, c'est le leadership dont nous devons faire montre. Ce leadership, ça veut dire qu'il faut un soutien politique. Je suis content pour lancer l'agence que je dirige. Je bénéficie totalement du soutien de mon président, son Excellence Félix Tshisekedi Tshilombo, qui nous soutient dans son agenda des top 5 priorités. 5 priorités aujourd'hui. L'électricité fait partie et l'accès pour tous fait partie des 5 priorités du gouvernement. Voilà pourquoi le gouvernement a été la première agence, le premier bailleur à soutenir l'ANSER que je dirige avec les fonds de subsides. mais aussi avec des investissements dans le cadre du programme de développement local 145 territoires que nous sommes en train de mener aujourd'hui. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons des champions au niveau du gouvernement qui sont décidés à faire bouger les lignes, à faire changer la trajectoire de développement. Je pense que c'est une opportunité qu'on doit saisir et je voudrais vraiment encourager. Et cela, ce n'est pas seulement en RDC, je vois cela au Sénégal, je vois cela en Côte d'Ivoire, des pays qui ont fait des miracles, je vois cela au Mali, je vois cela au Nigeria et plusieurs autres pays sont en train de faire le même progrès. On a un leadership fort. Deuxième élément, en termes de partenariats, c'est du côté des partenaires. Nous voulons aussi lancer un message du côté des partenaires aujourd'hui pour que les partenaires comprennent que s'ils veulent nous soutenir, il y a des conditions et ce qui requiert ce secteur. La première, c'est qu'il faut beaucoup d'argent pour le secteur de l'énergie. Ça nécessite des ressources très importantes. La deuxième chose, si on a des ressources, il faut simplifier les procédures. Nous avons beaucoup de ressources au niveau des pays qui sont mobilisés, mais les décaissements ou la mise en œuvre ou le délivrer, comme on aime le dire, il est très faible. Parce qu'il y a beaucoup de procédures, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de contraintes, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de due diligence qui ne sont pas appropriées. Nous voulons vraiment que les agences nous aident à avancer très vite. Le dernier message, pour terminer, c'est à l'endroit du secteur privé. Le secteur privé, nous voulons les inviter à venir explorer ces marchés. C'est un marché qui se met en place, c'est un nouveau business qui se met en place et qui a de l'avenir. Selon les dernières statistiques que j'ai reçues, on nous dit que le secteur de comme revenu, mais on nous dit que le secteur de l'énergie pourra rapporter 2 fois les chiffres d'affaires plus que la téléphone. Donc c'est un marché important, c'est une opportunité d'investissement pour le secteur privé et nous restons ouverts en tant que gouvernement pour soutenir le secteur privé. Je voudrais remercier les PNUD et remercier particulièrement les PNUD RDC qui nous apportent un soutien sans faille aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup, Madame Aruna. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Please give him a noisier round of applause. There's a lot of noise in the background. Let's make more noise than others. Thank you so much, Waisha. The scale of the need, the importance of partnerships, but more importantly, the need for us to bring in business. The fact that this is a business proposition for the private sector. It could really be transformative. But I especially want to thank you for your passion. We can see in his delivery a real depth of commitment and passion to transform your country and your community through the energy access that we're speaking about here today. We're going to go straight transition into the panel, and I promise you an exciting discussion with this panel. Let me start with Nicole. Nicole, come through and have a seat. So Nicole is from Energy City, right? And really interesting organization here. You are actually the founder of Energy City, which is a solar mini-grids company that's present mostly in West Africa. So we're going to hear from Nicole. Also, Dr. Daniel Schroth. Daniel Schroth. You know, I have a difficult name as well, so I sympathize. Daniel is the director of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Department at the Africa Development Bank Group. And then, last but not least, we have Oluwadabira Abiola Awe. You can take this seat, yes, who is from Student Energy. She is a youth energy activist and Ventures and Capital Campaign Associate at Student Energy. Oluwadabira, we have this honor to have you with us here today as the youngest member of the panel. So I'm going to, I think we have a video first before, is that correct? Do we have a video before the panel starts? A short video just on the overview of the Africa Mini-Grid program. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're going to start with Dr. Daniel here because I know he has a time constraint. So you heard Mr. Chinamula speak. You also heard the administrator and the CEO, and I think all of them underline the need to have a different approach. What, in your view, are 3 things we need to do differently to be able to actually realize the potential of this mini-grid initiative?
Right. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure being in the UNDP pavilion and partnering with UNDP, Jeff, and RMI on this Africa mini-grids program. I think we all know that achieving universal access to electricity in Africa will require a large-scale scale-up of decentralized energy access solutions, including mini-grids. That's what all the analysis from the International Energy Agency and others indicate very clearly. In terms of maybe 3 key points that I would like to highlight. First is, I think we need to do a lot more around sort of having standardized market development approaches, having kind of a clear approach to what is the required regulation. There's already a lot being done in many African countries from which we can learn. There's no need to reinvent the wheel each time. It also requires clearly to have a view around how concession contracts are structured, how you address the whole tariff issues, and of course sort of how do you also bundle different mini-grids into a larger program. So that's really for us the second key recommendation really is to look at larger scale national type mini-grid rollout programs where a lot has already been done in terms of all the required regulatory aspects, all the issues around site identification, what are potential anchor loads, what is sort of demand in these kind of mini-grids, and then sort of to structure that, to have a tender process and to provide together with that structured process sort of a combination of stable finance, I would say, which includes also concessional finance for connections, result-based finance, viability gap finance, but also looking at guarantees where they are necessary. One of the big risks for mini-grids is obviously the demand risk, to have a clear understanding of what is sort of the expected demand. And I think one of the lessons we have learned is that demand does not grow from one day to another. It's actually something that has to develop over time, and that obviously poses a risk for the private sector. So if there is sort of a minimum revenue type guarantee instrument that can sort of help mitigate that risk. Just to give one example, because Edith Ball is here from DRC, we're working on a very exciting mini-grid program in DRC, which is called the Moye project, which was tendered. We've supported that process early on. An international consortium was selected. They've done a lot of additional studies. We have mobilized from the GCF concessional resources. We have, through our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, mobilized additional concessional resources that will be blended with our private finance and other kind of stakeholders. And I think this is sort of can be an example model to be rolled out in other countries as well. And I think the last and third point, Edith Bulb mentioned productive use. That is certainly critical to improve the revenue side of things. But also I think the aspect that you highlighted is sort of to make sure that in that procurement we place a lot of emphasis also on the quality, to really select kind of developers, companies that are actually able to deliver this on a quality basis, to avoid a situation where you have mini-grids sort of being established and then a couple of years later they're actually non-functional. So those are sort of maybe the 3 key points I wanted to highlight, and I really already want to apologize up front that I will need to run very shortly to another event. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, for that. Thank you. And before you run off, because you are from a bank, and an important bank for the continent, I want to follow up on the issue of financing. Very interesting what you say about bundling, because Dr. Chinamula talked about scale. And when we say mini-grids, we don't mean that we just do things in fragmented small packages, but we're actually, I mean, what you're proposing as a new approach is that we look at mega systems, mini-grids, but mega structures that actually are meaningful from a financing perspective. So what would you say to a business, you know, like an entrepreneur who has all the licensing, the enabling environment, the regulatory environment, the the support from the government to go big in terms of bundling, but doesn't know where to go for the financing at that scale.
Right. I mean, we're all in favor of going big. So obviously, if it's a large program of a certain size, we're keen from our side directly from investing through the African Development Bank side. We have our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa to blend with our sort of commercial lending to make this more viable and affordable as well for the private sector. And for smaller scale projects where the transaction cost is sort of too high for the bank to invest directly, we have a number of facilities created. I would just like to mention the Facility for Energy Inclusion, where we provided sort of all the junior capital required. It's managed now by Lionshead Global Partners, and they are sort of looking and able sort of to provide financing for projects that are sort of a size smaller than where the bank normally invests in. So
your message would be that financial institutions should look into coming up with new facilities, actually.
I'm not saying, my views, personal views, there's so many facilities out there. It's really not about creating, again, new facilities. It's probably rather about sort of scaling up facilities that already have a track record of delivery, making sure that they have the resources to scale. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased here, but we have certainly with CEFA one key resource. We've been able to collect new commitments just last Friday of $64 million in grant contributions into CEFA, which we're then now able to deploy either as grant where it's really justified, but also as concessional debt where that can sort of help make a difference, providing guarantees where they're necessary. So it's really about scaling instruments that already have a track record rather than creating always new. Because if you create a new instrument, it's going to take a long time before that is operational. That's at least our experience.
Okay, excellent. Well, big hand of applause for Africa Development Bank, because they are really innovative in what they've been trying to do in this space. And we're grateful really to your partnership, for your partnership and your strategic approach to this matter. So thank you very much. I know you have to run, Daniel. Thank you. So I'm going to go straight to my second question is for Nicole. So Nicole, you were the founder of the Minigrids company, Energy City. Very excited and congratulations. This initiative operates in various countries. But I have a few here: Benin, Liberia, 2 countries where the AMP will actually be implemented. So, in your view, how can the public sector understand and work better with the private sector? As a developer yourself, what areas would you like to see UNDP, Africa Development Bank, and others come in?
So first of all, thank you for having me today. Very pleased to be here in the UNDP Pavilion. As Awuna mentioned, my company, Energicity Corp, we develop mini-grids in Sierra Leone, Benin, and Liberia, expanding to other countries. We've been operating for about 7 years in total and are serving around 70,000 people currently, with plans to expand to about 200,000 people by the end of next year. As context, it's interesting that you asked the question, what do we need help with to grow faster, to help meet the SDG goal in the time in which we've stated? And it's interesting because it's actually what I would say our biggest obstacles are counter to what Daniel just said. So the things that slow us down the most are access to financing, but in a certain sense, going bigger slows us down more. The programs that we've had the slowest time rolling out have been the most ambitious. We want to electrify 100,000 people at once, the government says. But in order to do that, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in place, the tendering process, et cetera. And that can take years. If we were able to sort of have a structure that allows us to develop, we have 10 projects now, and roll out
incrementally.
And yes, incrementally in a distributed energy fashion, that actually, I believe, in combination with these larger programs, that I believe actually leads to more people getting electricity faster. So one, this totally understandable reliance and interest in large-scale programs, I think gets in the way of our being able to serve more people as quickly as possible. It's the first thing. And then the second are the regulatory environments and constraints. You know, as you mentioned, the regulatory environment is critical, and having that leadership and commitment at the government level is critical. But there are still sort of fine-tuned aspects that make mini-grids faster versus slower and make mini-grids lower cost for the end consumer, which is obviously what we all want. You know, interestingly, you mentioned one point, and I'm going to dig in on this one point, that the ultimate goal is grid connectivity, main grid connectivity. And it's interesting because I'm saying this, I am biased, that the private sector is an integral part of the solution, but I think most people agree. The idea that the main grid will supplant mini-grids actually constrains the private sector's ability to invest. Not mine. I'm committed. I bought the farm. But my investors are less interested in investing if they believe something is going to come and supplant. So I think that we need to continue to think and press on what are the long-term solutions, how do we collaborate in building a distributed grid, which we're seeing more and more in the era of climate change. Distribution is critical to long-term resilience. A carbon or decarbonized grid, and again, mini-grids are one strategy for really driving decarbonization of national grids, and one that allows long-term partnership with private investment. So.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point, Nicole. I think, good round of applause for her. I think that last point you made is important to pause on, because obviously what we're trying to do here is make sure that everyone has access. How they get it, it's another matter, right? And that, you know, the future is green, and we are going to invest more and more in renewables. So mini-grids provide that opportunity. Now, I think the key principle is whatever the state has responsibility for, the provision of access to energy to all of its population. No one in any country should feel that they are marginal to the central planning and budgeting of a country. So, I mean, that was my point. Eventually, the state has to embrace the needs of all. In the meantime, we need to crowd in other actors who are going to make access faster. But it's interesting intel that you bring about what could actually slow down investment in mini-grids should the long term not, you know, foresee the participation of those actors. It's a good thing to reflect on. I want to come to our youngest member of the panel here. Now, Africa is a very young continent. We have, you know, a lot of young people in it, and many of them actually today belongs to them. Many of them need to dream big for their lives and their future. And what is that dream without energy? I want to hear your story, Oluwabamire. What got you into this field of being an energy activist? What's your story?
Amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be at the UNDP Pavilion. And that's a very good question, because I've actually been in renewable energy since my first international conference was actually when I was 9 years old. And it was a UNEP conference. And so how I got into energy was because I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. And I know that a few of you here, you know Lagos. If you've not been, you've obviously heard of Lagos. And there's a huge energy access gap there. I remember the first time I got into the UK, you know, I was scrambling looking for how to charge my phone for 6 hours so that, you know, I would have electricity on it. But everybody was looking at me like, you know, what's happening? And that's the reality of Lagos. There's just, you know, electricity for a few hours, so there's an energy access issue. And then I remember subconsciously making up my mind that there should be a solution for this. Somehow, whatever it is, I was going to, go ahead and get the knowledge I need and prepare myself and do just that. And so I got into engineering just because, there were no streamlined courses for renewable energy at that time. And I was interning, sometimes for free, sometimes I just do it to gain the experience. But at 18, I found a clean cooking, company and started working for them. And that was how I grew, learning about renewable energy. By the time I was 21, I was already working on the leadership, team of that company. And I said that just to say this, that youth are usually viewed, they have a perceived lack of experience just because, it's risky. And, they just feel like, oh, you haven't had 10, 20 years of experience, and so you wouldn't be able to deploy a mini-grid or, manage a team. But actually, there's a huge untapped potential with young people. It's that they can take the opportunity that they have, they can learn on the job, and they can be one of the best employees that you have ever seen. And that takes me to your question about, the role of youth. One, I see youth as a powerful workforce, especially as we look towards the timeline of 2030. Renewable energy is going to create 122 million jobs, and we're going to need young people to do that because Africa is a youthful population. So if 60% of the population, by 2030 are unemployed, how are we going to make up for those numbers, that data? And so they are an important part. And it's not just about the technical aspect of it, deploying solar systems, getting them into STEM. That's important. But there are also other services. There's sales, there's distribution, there's marketing, there are after-sale services. And, young people, especially the ones I've seen in Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, they are very motivated to get into energy, but sometimes they just need their push. They need the mentorship, they need the coaching, they need someone to take a chance on them, just like they did for me and a few other young people. And that's one part of it. The second part is that young people are agents of change. And if you had a sit-down conversation with one of these big tech companies like Meta or Facebook, they would tell you that if you want, a market to grow exponentially, you need to be tapping into the young people, those under 30, those under 35. That's the only way that market, would be sustainably grow. So that's second. You need to engage them at community level and ensure that young people are informing your decisions, mini-grid, solar, whatever it is in the just transition, young people must be, community leaders and influencers of change. Then finally, it's the entrepreneurship aspect of it. Yes, we have 81 gigawatts of, excluding South Africa, we have 81 gigawatts of capacity being generated in Africa. And just to put that in perspective, 216 gigawatts is being generated in Canada, and that's for a continent that is 3 times smaller than 1 billion people in Africa. And that shows that for us to achieve energy access by 2030, what we're going to need is a lot of mini-grids, a lot of this sort of, projects that are being launched. And that's only going to happen through entrepreneurship and supporting innovation. And so the young people in Africa, are very key to that happening. Entrepreneurship is key, and it's financing, it's support, it's mentorship, it's giving them the play-by-play to be able to build their own solar projects, to be able to deploy, mini-grids, to be able to, even come up with a lantern. All those things make up the ripple effect that would help us to bridge that energy gap and, provide clean and affordable energy by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure that some in the audience will have questions for you. What a journey that you've had, starting with your own personal experience. But I think one thing that you said a lot of good things, but one that I picked up is the workforce demand. The fact that this sector is going to demand a lot of people working, and that workforce is there in Africa. So what are we doing in our various countries to invest in the kind of education? Because you took your own initiative. Nobody pushed you. It was your experience. It was your interest that drove you to the tracks that you took. Now, if we were to be more intentional about getting young people to engage in this space and to prepare themselves for those jobs, what do you think we have to do as UNDP, as countries, as the public sector, governments, Imagine that you are addressing this to Idris, who is Director General in his own government. What can the government do to promote the engagement of youth and the preparation of youth for this field?
Thank you. That's a great question. Number one is to prioritize capacity building. Highlighted some of the different things that deploying mini grids and off-grid solar solutions is going to require, but there needs to be capacity building, but in scale. And of course, we don't expect that UNDP can do all of that because there are a lot of African youth, but then collaboration and partnership is the game of life. So there are so many, organizations, especially like, our Student Energy, and there are a few others, SDG7 constituency, other youth organizations.
So tell us a little bit about Student Energy.
Oh, amazing. Student Energy is a youth organization, and we've been working with young people for the past 12 years on the energy transition. So we have skills and capacity building training, 12 international suites of program that supports young people to take action on the energy transition. So everything from what is energy or what is energy access to I have a solar project and I'm ready to deploy it and I need a mentor and I need finance for it. So all those things and everything in between, and that's what Student Energy does. And we have developed an adaptable, scalable model that has been able to reach 190 countries and engaging 50,000 young people to be able to take action. So we already have that structure in place for capacity building. If today we have 1,000 Nigerian young people who want to learn about carbon accounting or policy, we have developed a structure that can do that. So for that to work effectively, UNDP governments can work with organizations like Student Energy to be able to reach where the demand is, whether that's Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, that's one of it. Then the second one is also to invest in data. And I know that that's not being talked about a lot, but if we're going to talk about financing, we also need to look at the evidence that is backing that up. We need to look at how many rural communities require solar panels, and how many gigawatts of electricity is going to produce the kind of capacity that we need in those areas. So the data needs to be there. We also see, how many accountants are we going to need? How many engineers are we going to need? How many contractors? How many entrepreneurs are going to work? So that data is necessary. And I think it's important to invest in, testing these different kinds of interventions also. And then financing also is very key. Financing is also very key, so I'm just going to wrap up there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. A round of applause for our panels. Thank you all very much. I think we will conclude it there from the mouth of babes. Thank you so much. And we're going to now... Yes. So I think, panelists, you can take back your seats. So this event, we are co-organizing with RMI and Jeff, and we have RMI in the room. Raul is going to give us some closing remarks before we officially launch the Minigrids program. Raul, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ahuna, for hosting this conversation. I really like to emphasize the testimonies from the panelists, really encouraging. Many of the issues that have been raised today are the issues that we are trying to address through the Africa Minigrids program, and RMI is very excited to be partnering with UNDP, with the African Development Bank, the Global Energy Environment Facility, and many others in the private sector, in government, to make some of these, to realize some of these promises. So from our side, we're extremely excited to be part of this partnership. Precisely, one of our roles is going to be to addressing some of the data gaps, to build the capacity, and most importantly, to ensure that scalability of some of the energy access issues that you highlighted, starting small, but always thinking big. So from our side, we are extremely excited to do that. RMI brings 40 years of experience doing this in the United States as well as in the Global South, and we are very keen on doing this right now in the continent that has 400 million people represented by the 21 countries of the AMP without access to electricity. So from our side, we want to be very useful to this partnership, and we want to thank UNDP for the leadership in this exercise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raul. I think, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I think Raul has been quite modest. RMI has been quite instrumental in pushing for this program, and I really want to personally thank you, Raul, and the whole RMI team for your interest, but also your passion and your determination for us to get this on the road. Now, this Africa Minigrids program, AMP, is on the road. We are going to deliver it. 21 countries, 21 good stories. That's what we're expecting. And we want to really invite all of you to keep an eye on AMP. Kick us hard if you see it not moving fast enough, because people cannot wait. We need to make sure that everyone who needs this access gets it. And in the 21 countries where we've committed to do this, we hope that we'll be able to deliver results very quickly. And we hope eventually that we expand to all the countries on the continent. So thank you all very much. And the AMP is blessed, launched, blessed, and and funded. Thank you to Jeff. Thank you to GEF for getting us started. May we get more resources, right?